Greetings and konnichiwa, and welcome to the Onyx Tavern. This is your host, the Barkeep, bringing you podcast 60 here at the Tavern, presented by Hirotaku.com. Well, I want to go ahead and start by apologizing to everyone that I haven't had many new videos or updates within the last week, but unfortunately schoolwork takes precedent over that, and since today is President's Day and I'm done with all my work, I definitely want to go ahead and present you guys with today's podcast, which will be covering the Kyoryuger final and the wrap-up of the series. But also to make up for lost time, we will have a vlog on Super Mega Force that is forthcoming, and once I'm able to find the subbed version of Tokyuger, then I will go ahead and give my vlog on that series as well. So there'll be a lot coming up within the next week. I'll have a little bit more time to go ahead and focus on it. But for today, we're going to go ahead and talk about the final to Kyoryuger, particularly what happened, and just kind of my overall thoughts on the series in general. As far as the final episode is concerned, I thought it was good. It was definitely better than the Go Buster final, maybe on par with the Go Kaiger final, but a couple of things kind of bother me about it, and I want to kind of go through a few things that were concerned to me in regards to tying up the series, tying up the characters, and what I think is going to kind of lead us into Kyoryuger 100 years after. So basically the final is your standard final. The final boss shows himself, has to be defeated. And in this, you know, we have the boss that has the Frozen Palace, is going to use it to, I believe he's going to amplify evil music throughout the earth, in which he's going to kill everybody. All the Kyoryugers band together, and they ended up stopping him. But ultimately, it came down to King destroying the boss on his own, with the additional Kyoryugers singing, of all things, to assist him. And the series pretty much ends with everything going back to normal, to basically a status quo for all of our characters, and King and Amy hook up at the end of the series. Now I want to go ahead and talk mainly about King and Amy here, and this has been covered on a number of other blogs and websites, so you're probably aware of it, and I want to kind of throw my 2 cents into this as well. The big issue is that Amy and King get together at the end of the series, and as 100 years later indicates, they have children who in turn have children and so forth, because 2 of the Kyoryugers 100 years after are brother and sister and are descendants of both King and Amy. Now the reason this is such a problem for everybody is it really came out of nowhere. As far as relationships with Daigo go in the series, or King, I like calling him King. As far as relationships with King goes in the series, he had kind of a relationship with the singer from the movie who came back in a later part in the series, but he's kind of oblivious. He really just looks at them as close friends. And it's really hard to gauge if she's really into him or not, but there is something of a romance going on there. The next instance we get is Yayoi, who completely has a crush on him, so much that she has tons of photos of him, and of course Ian realizes this, but King is very oblivious to this as well. And then when all 3 of the girls get together in a later episode, Amy is jealous of Yayoi, basically saying, "Oh, but I like King, I don't know why." And that was the first instance it was brought up, and it was not brought up again until the final episode. And so, for a lot of people, this came out of nowhere. I mean, it was previously established, but the thing is that King treats everybody equal on the team. No one is greater, no one is lesser, everybody is the same, everybody is his friend. But the way this final makes is that he's always cared for Amy in some way, that he's looked at Amy as being almost more than a friend. And Amy, for some reason, is falling deeply in love with him. And I'm not quite sure why. I couldn't tell you, because again, the only indication we got prior to this episode was that she was jealous of Yayoi. It was the whole thing. And that's pretty much it. I know the whole series is the culmination of one writer's work. I wish I knew the guy's name at the moment, but I can't go ahead and think of it. So he probably, he wrote every episode, plotted out what was going to go ahead and happen. I could see that the relationship between Amy and King was something that might have been established early on, but for various reasons was never really covered. Frankly, the only person who really was interested in Amy throughout the whole series was Ramirez. He's practically fawning over this girl, but of course he can't do anything. He's a spirit. So it was just... I don't know what to really go ahead and say about it. It just came out of left field, and I'm not so sure if I'm comfortable with it or not, because let's look at it this way. Daigo has a choice between 3 women. A very rich and successful singer, a very rich socialite, I guess is what you would call Amy, and an intelligent inventor and a scientist in Yayoi. Now, if it were up to me, I would be with Yayoi. I think she is the most attractive of the 3. And of course, since Daigo doesn't care about money, it goes on personality. And I'm going to be honest, of the 3 female characters that we got that were Kyoryugers, she's the less developed. And of the 3 love interests, she's probably the second most developed. So I don't know what it is that King would see in Amy, and I don't know what it is that Amy sees in King. Granted, I subscribe to the same theory that Linkara has about Tommy and Kimberly, that they're essentially soldiers in a war, and they have come close with each other and risked each other's lives. So that is that's an important thing to keep in mind, but I think there has to be more than just that, and there has to be more than that one episode and this brief lead up with the strawberry parfait. There has to be more than that for these characters. Personally, I would have liked a romance throughout the series. That's something we rarely get with Power Rangers and Sentai, is an ongoing romance between 2 characters. And I'm not saying that it should be turned into Dawson's Creek or anything like that. I'm just saying that it would be nice if the characters had steady girlfriends or wives throughout the entire series. Because, hey, as much as I like Ian and all that, I kind of wish that he would have settled with a girl. And actually, that's the next thing I want to kind of go into, is the whole status quo has been reset. Because when we start the series, all the characters come in with certain occupations and certain things to describe them. Soji is a student, therefore he's going to act like the youngest member. He's going to do, student stuff. And then you got, I can't pronounce the Blue Ranger's name. I want to say it's Nobuharu. I can't really do it, but I'm just going to call him the Blue Ranger, basically. Who, again, is still my favorite character. But he comes in as the oldest, of the group. I mean, Uchi is obviously much older, but he is the oldest, and he's the jack of all trades. He's the guy who's kind of down on his luck and is working hard, and he's the old man. But by the end of the series, Soji is still the youngest. He is still the student. And the Blue Ranger, he's still the old man. He's still the jack of all trades. He's still the guy making all of these jokes. The characters do not change from the first time that we are introduced to them to the end. Which is kind of odd, because I like all these characters. I thought they all did a really good job. The actors and actresses playing them were really good, but there was no dynamic shift in the characters. I can't think of anybody who was really changed from these experiences. Because look at Ian. After the boss is defeated and it's assumed Daigo is dead, and several days later, we see what the Kyoryugers are up to. They're doing their normal things. Amy is in her mansion with her butler doing nothing, which is, I assume, what she was always doing before she became a Kyoryuger. And Ian's on a date with a girl who's just blathering away about what they want to go ahead and do. This is how we were introduced to the Ian character, and this is how the Ian character is at the end of the series. Couldn't he have learned something along the way? Maybe he wouldn't be a womanizer at the end. Maybe he hooked up with Yayoi or somebody else. Maybe part of his character was learning to settle down. Now, obviously, we know he's going to do that because of, again, 100 years after, and I'll get into that a little bit more here later. But it's really disappointing to basically see all the characters back to where they were. yes, there is character building in the final episodes. Ian and Soji have that relationship where Ian no longer calls him boy and gathers respect for him. I like that. I think that's really good. But I think that the character should have fundamentally changed in some way. That there should have been some sort of shift where he's on the date with the girl, where maybe he proposes to one of the girls, or he decides to remain single or change his ways because he doesn't think that what he's doing is right anymore. Something like that. Soji, I mean, is he a senior in high school? Have him graduate and talk about going to college and all that. And Uchi, come on. Again, he's a few centuries behind. I would like to see him better adapt himself to present day. That was something that was never touched upon, as I stated in my mid-season review. And pretty much at the end, he is still the same character with the loyalty to King and the samurai code and all these things. So nobody really changes. Nobody is different than how they started. And that is bothersome to me. I wish I would have learned something along the way. And speaking of the Blue Ranger here, and as far as changing, I really, really wanted him to get with Canderilla at the end. I kind of saw it coming from the beginning that these two were not going to go ahead and be evil forever, that they would be reverted as human, or if they did die, they would, do a noble sacrifice. Typically, that happens with a lot of female characters, a lot of the lighter female characters. Like Hero, I don't know if he's female or she's male or whatever. I think it's male, but I could be wrong. There seems to be discrepancy with that. I like their character change, that they basically follow Torin's example and make their own lives, and they choose to serve humans. They want to help humanity, which is awesome. I think that's great. But I really, really wanted to see Canderella and Blue Ranger get together. I think the best episode of the series, or one of my favorites at least, is when they're kind of like getting together and they realize that, oh, it's Canderella, oh no, it's the Blue Ranger, but they actually develop feelings for each other. They have a genuine connection because he does all these jokes and she actually loves the jokes and thinks that they're humorous and everything. I think that would have been great if they would have gotten together at the end. True, it's a monster from space and, human, but she can assume human form, and there's never been any indication that there's a limitation for that. And plus, if you want to do the trite, oh, she's reverted to human, she lost all her powers. I can buy that. That's not that big of a deal. But it's not so much I want to get together because they were a good couple, but it would be good for their characters. The Canderella chose to be human, not for him, but basically for everything that happened, and he's part of it. I love his line where he's basically trying to make something of your life like Torin did. And I love the gesture she gives him at the end, but again, I wish they would have gotten together. And again, with 100 years after, they could have, who knows? We'll see when that comes down the line. I don't have much to say about Uchi just because, again, there isn't much to say. He hasn't developed since the last time I talked about the series. I did not like the fake out of his death. False drama. I mean, frankly, they probably should have killed him simply because, again, he wasn't growing as a character. He wasn't contributing anything. And I kind of think that his final moment should have been battling against Dolgold, or battling with Dolgold. And actually what would have been interesting is I thought since he died, he would join with Tessai and Ramirez and Torin in the underworld to fight. And then maybe Dolgold would be there too. That's not what happened. Apparently music brought him back to life, and that's a cop-out. Again, I don't really like it. I think they could have done something better with it. Because having him die, I think would have resonated more. That, they think King dies, and they're all depressed about it. But what if Uchi had died and did not come back, And then there were, oh my god, here's another one. We lost Torin, we lost Uchi. Now we're going to lose King. Oh no, this is not going to be good. That's kind of what the reaction I wanted from these characters. And I want his death to actually mean something. And the fact that he dies and then comes back to life, it means nothing. It really does. Now, of course, Torin's death, I think, meant a lot. And I'm a little sad that it kind of left him to die, but given what we know about religion in Sentai and what the afterlife is, he's obviously in a better place, so it's not that bad. I just kind of wish that King's dad would have said something about killing him, that they would have been prepared and it wouldn't be this big ordeal, oh no, what's he doing and stuff like that. But I kind of suspect his dad wouldn't be evil. That's a little much, I think. But I'm also curious to why King's dad just left at the end of the series. I mean, he kind of knew his son was alive. I guess he felt it in the Force or something like that. But a nice interaction with him and his son before he left. And actually, I've been waiting for that conflict between father and son. I mean, we had the battle, yes, but I mean the conflict, like, why did you leave me? Why couldn't I go with you? And stuff like that. Which King admittedly stated, I think, at one point, was not a big deal for him, that he understood and, was not resentful as father. I kind of thought that was a conversation worth having for their characters at some point in the series. Soji, again, he didn't really change. I can't tell you much about him, but I do love the episode where we establish about his divorced parents staying with his father, and the reason he stayed with his father is because he knew his father needed that emotional support, and the way he stands up to his parents. I thought that was very powerful stuff. I thought that was really good. And I wanted to see more of that. I wanted to see more of his character go through things like that. And yes, he did go through a change in the episode, but again, as I said, by the end, doesn't mean much. Ramirez and Tessai, I wish they had more to do. Again, I love Ramirez. I think he's my favorite Ranger just because he's so hilarious and so honest. Tessai, I don't have much to say about him, but I am curious about a couple of things, such as it was well established in the first episode that the Zords had to choose the Rangers, basically. But now, in the final episodes, it's you can pass on your powers to anybody, I guess regardless of what your Zord tells you to go ahead and do. Because we know Yayoi had to pretty much convince Palezon that she was worthy of the powers. Bragigas, chose Torin because he was his friend back in the day and all that. So those at least made sense. But given the powers to Yuko and Tessai's descendant, I can understand Yuko. She makes sense because, one, she has super strength, which is really glossed over after that one episode that everybody kind of forgets that. And of course, as Raptor likes pointing out, it adds to the female ratio on the team, which is always a good thing. But I thought she was a legitimate choice. It's kind of sad that she didn't do anything really in the final, other than, he actually battled, demorphed, and went to the city to fight off the monsters. Which, by the way, it seems like this episode was longer because it seems to be a sequence in the city. We keep getting these shots of all these civilians, and I wonder if there was like an extended sequence where Yuko and Tessai's descendant are fighting in the city. Maybe that'll be in a director's cut when this series eventually gets on Blu-ray, but it was definitely something I was like, I thought there should be more here. And Tessai's descendant, I remember the episode in which he appeared. He didn't leave much of an impression on me, and I guess it's kind of curious that he would have chose him, if only for the fact that he's his descendant and he shows signs of nobility. I don't know who else it could have gone to be honest, but for what we were given, I think that was okay. I'm just really upset Ramirez had to go ahead and leave. I really wanted to see more of him towards the end here. And the Doctor and Yayoi, I thought it was kind of cool that they were fighting side by side in the Megazord to fight the monster. Yayoi doesn't really seem too upset that Daigo chose Amy over her. And I don't know what she and the Doctor plan to do after this. It's not really kind of established. I mean, here's the weird thing about the series is that while battling Debos, he admits to Daigo that there's a greater power than him, that there's a higher power than him somewhere out in space. Now, King comes up and basically says to everybody, hey, there's a greater Debos out there. Well, we'll face that threat when it comes. Which, in the context of just the series in that episode, that line does not make much sense. Because if that's the case, then I'm surprised Daigo and them were not talking about going out to get them. Because as you recall, when the Doctor and Yeo are first introduced, they were gathering intelligence information on the Debos from worlds that they had already conquered and destroyed, which is why they retrofitted Palezon to travel into space. So I wonder why this series did not decide to go that direction, much like Bokanger, because Bokanger ended with Red and Pink going out into space to find more precious throughout the universe. So I kind of expected something similar here that, again, anytime that there's a bigger threat introduced at the end of the series, the Rangers always go to save the world. And this is like in Go-Onger. They were too complacent with their normal lives after defeating the Gaiac, and then they find out about, I think it's like the president or the emperor or something, and then they jump at the chance to go after him, to go fight him. The Kyoryugers do not do that. Again, it just seems that they go back to their normal everyday lives. But again, why bring up that line if you're not going to actively pursue it? But again, I think this leads into the 100 years after. And again, I'm putting that off towards the end here just because there's a little bit to talk about that in its entirety. Well, I mean, the series, I really enjoyed it. I see what they were trying to do in the wake of Go Buster. That Go Buster was a dark and serious series which halfway through did not work for them for whatever reason, and they switched it to more humorous, and supposedly it got a little bit better. But really, that season was kind of a mess because of the way they were trying to change it. So what Kyoryuger tried to do was keep a consistent tone. And that's something I will credit the show on, is that it kept a consistent tone and a consistent story throughout the series. It wasn't like Geki Ranger, which I love Geki Ranger, by the way, where it's this one plot, but then you find out halfway through or 3/4 of the way through, it was something else entirely going on. For the most part, they stuck to everything being the same storyline. Things that were introduced paid off and picked up later out throughout the series, and it looks like they had a genuine plan that they were going by instead of making stuff up halfway through because the ratings weren't good. And the comical tone did go ahead and work. The aspect of music kind of confuses me a little bit on this series because I still don't understand the dancing. I don't know what in Japanese history or tradition justifies that. The series doesn't give an explanation other than the fact that they're dancing because they feel the need to, which is a cop-out itself. And of course, Torin states that it's dinosaurs and music that kind of inspired him to rebel. I don't necessarily understand how or what kind of music was available back in the Jurassic period. Nevertheless, that's what the series was based on. And of course, what helped win everything in the end, other than Daigo fighting the boss, was the spirit or the music of the earth, which I believe is connected to the essence and the spirit of the earth, which we saw in Gokaiger. I just find it odd that the music that has been on Earth for eons, the music that is pure and good that can defeat evil, just happens to be the theme song to Kyoryuger. And the whole thing that's odd about that is like they don't have a theme song, and yet they're able to sing all the lyrics of the theme song, which includes their names into it, which includes Kyoryuger. I don't get that. I mean, if it was just instrumental, I can get it, but they're actually singing the lyrics. And that kind of like the Whoville thing where they all get together and sing, oh, we don't have Christmas, but we still have ourselves. Which I really thought that would have been the scene where everybody got together, all the characters that were established, That didn't happen. I really kind of was hoping for it, because the inclusion of Yayoi at the end was a little bit odd, because she really hadn't been present prior to the events of the last episode. She wasn't doing much or interacting, so it was just a little confusing to why she was in there. Nevertheless, we got the song being sung, and we ended up saving the day. Now I will go ahead and talk about 100 years later before I kind of get wrapped up. Ultimately, I think the whole reason that we had Uchi survive, the mention of the Space Deboss, and Daigo and Amy getting together is to lead into the 100 Years After movie that's coming in the summer. Because the 100 Years After movie is going to focus on their descendants, which coincidentally happen to be played by the same actors. So if Uchi had died, he would have had no descendant and he couldn't be in the movie. The Space Deboss, I imagine, would be the villain that's coming back. I mean, I don't see these Kyoryugers fighting other enemies other than the Deboss, just given how other Sentais are. Yeah, we still have our powers, but sorry, Kyoryuger, we're not going to come help you with your fight. We're just going to hang back until the next crossover. That seems to be the mentality. And of course, to make Navy and Cyan brother and sister, I don't know how that's going to play out. I mean, it's an emphasis that they're making in the promotional material that they are brother and sister, so that's going to have to pay off somewhere in the movie. And the fact that Daigo is going to be present, or at least they say he's going to be present, is... Yeah, I think what's going to happen is it's going to be like, it's your destiny to be with Amy. So maybe they're going to retcon something, like maybe while he was in the ship, he was transported to the future and then transported back in time, and then was told he must get with Amy or something like that to preserve the future, which would be interesting. And I don't mind retcons like that. That's just purely speculation on my part, but it would definitely be interesting to see. But with 100 Years After, I think the last episode was a lot of setup for that. My ultimate question about 100 Years After is, why should we care about characters 100 years in the future? They're descendants of these heroes, and where are we going to be in their story? Are we going to be on the first time they become the new Kyoryugers? Are we going to be their last battle, somewhere in between? It's very odd, and I could probably do a whole podcast on it, but I'm just not quite sure of it at the moment, and I just kind of want to see where that takes us. Well, I think I've rambled on enough today about Kyoryuger. Again, I like the series. Is it better than Go Buster? Probably. Is it as good as, say, Geki Rangers in terms of story? Not as much. But the fact of the matter is that they wanted a lighthearted show. They did it. They succeeded. They came up with some great characters, good storylines, and it's definitely a series I would watch again. I am cautious, as I've said before, how they're going to adapt it into Dino Charge. But since it was so successful, that's why Dino Charge is being made instead of Go Buster, which again I'm still kind of against for different reasons. But yeah, it was a good show. I would suggest to all of you all who have not seen it to definitely find the torrents for them. Watch them. It's only 48 episodes for some reason. It's post normal 50 or 51. I can't find an explanation on that. But it's pretty quick. It gets through things. It doesn't really have a lot of episodes where they're doing nothing. Every episode does seem to progress a storyline in some fashion. So it's not a lot of standalones. It's very colorful. I like the concept of the 10 Rangers. I think that works pretty well in this show. I wish they could have exploited that a little bit more. But, hey, maybe we'll get that Kyoryuger given the fact that they already have 17 scheduled Zords on the way. So, but I want to thank you guys for listening to my Kyoryuger video. Just my, again, final thoughts on the series. I will have a vlog for Kyoryuger once I go ahead and get a sub copy to watch, and of course look out for the Super Mega Force first episode review, which I will most likely be doing with Raptor and D Jedi. So thank you guys again. Have yourselves a good evening, and the tavern is now closed.